My stepmom drained my inheritance, saying it was for my own good. I stared at the bank statement in my hands, the numbers blurring as my vision tunneled. $247.83. That's all that remained of my mother's $150,000 inheritance, the nest egg she'd carefully saved for my education and future before cervical cancer took her when I was 16. There has to be a mistake, I whispered to the teller, my voice cracking. Marcus, according to his name tag, looked at me with genuine sympathy. I'm sorry, but the withdrawals show here clear as day. Large transfers every few months over the past 3 years. The account holder authorized was. He squinted at his screen, Patricia Chin Rodriguez. Your stepmother, I assume. My stepmother. The woman who'd swooped into my grieving father's life 8 months after Mom's funeral, armed with casseroles and a practiced smile. Patricia, who'd convinced Dad that a 19-year-old couldn't possibly handle that kind of money responsibly. Patricia, who'd insisted on being added as a co-guardian of my inheritance just until I turned 25 and proved I was mature enough. Can you print out the full transaction history? My hands were shaking now. Everything from the past 3 years. The papers Marcus handed me told a story I wished I couldn't read. September 2021, $15,000 withdrawal, right after Patricia's daughter Melissa started at USC. December 2021, $8,500, around the time Patricia got those veneers she claimed were medically necessary. March 2022, $12,000, when she redecorated the living room because the old furniture was too depressing and reminded everyone of Mom. Each transaction felt like a knife twist. This wasn't just money, this was my mother's final gift to me. The life insurance policy she'd insisted on even when the premiums stretched our budget. The savings account she'd fed $20 at a time, working double shifts at the hospital to build something for my future. I drove home in a daze, the bank statements burning against my chest where I tucked them inside my jacket. Our house, Dad's house, I corrected myself bitterly, sat pristine in the afternoon sun. Patricia's new BMW gleamed in the driveway, the one she bought last spring for better gas mileage. Right. Better gas mileage that cost $60,000. Patricia was in the kitchen when I walked in, arranging flowers that probably cost more than my textbooks for the semester. She looked up with that practiced smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes when Dad wasn't around. Oh, Emma. You're home early. How was Professor Martinez's class? I studied her face, the subtle Botox that had erased the laugh lines, the professionally highlighted hair, the diamond tennis bracelet that had appeared around Christmas. All of it funded by my mother's sacrifice. It was educational, I said carefully. Patricia, I need to ask you something about my inheritance account. Something flickered across her expression, so quick I almost missed it. Fear. Guilt. Then the mask snapped back into place. Of course, sweetie. Though I'm not sure what there is to discuss. As we've talked about, that money is being carefully managed for your future. These are complicated financial matters. Show me the statements. Emma. Her voice took on that patronizing tone that made my skin crawl. We've been over this. Your father and I agreed that someone your age shouldn't be burdened with. Show me the goddamn statements, Patricia. The flower arrangement forgotten, we stared at each other across the granite island, the island she'd insisted on installing to modernize Mom's kitchen. I already knew what those statements would reveal. The question now was what I was going to do about it. I don't appreciate your tone, young lady. Patricia's voice hardened, dropping the fake sweetness she usually maintained. After everything your father and I have done for you. Everything you've done for me. The laugh that escaped my throat sounded foreign, bitter. Like what, exactly? Like stealing my mother's money. Stealing. She clutched her pearls, literally clutched the strand around her neck that I now realized probably cost $3 grand of Mom's money. How dare you accuse me of? $8,500 in December 2021. $12,000 in March 2022. $15,000 last September. I pulled the bank statements from my jacket, watching her face drain of color. Should I keep going? Because I've got 3 years worth of transactions here. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Then her eyes narrowed, and I saw a glimpse of the woman behind the Stepford wife facade. You went to the bank behind our backs. After we explicitly told you that account was being handled by adults who actually understand financial responsibility. Adults who understand how to spend money that isn't theirs, you mean. That money was being invested. Managed properly. Do you have any idea how volatile the market has been? We were protecting your inheritance from. Protecting it? There's $247 left, Patricia. $247 out of $150,000 that my dying mother saved for me. My voice cracked on the word dying, and I hated showing that vulnerability in front of her. But Patricia latched onto it like a predator sensing weakness. Her expression shifted back to that practiced concern, the mask sliding into place so smoothly it was terrifying. Oh, sweetie. She reached across the island like she wanted to touch my hand. I jerked back. I know you're upset. You're thinking about your mom, and that's making everything feel more emotional than it needs to be. But your father and I have been managing those funds responsibly. There have been some necessary expenses, your college tuition, your health insurance, maintaining this house that you live in rent-free. My tuition comes from financial aid and student loans. I've seen those bills. My hands were shaking again, but this time it was pure rage. And since when does maintaining the house require a BMW and a kitchen renovation and paying for Melissa's sorority fees? Patricia's carefully composed expression flickered. How do you know about? She caught herself, but too late. About what? About the $4,500 you withdrew in August for Kappa Delta initiation fees? Or the $6,200 in November for Danny's lacrosse camp? I hadn't been guessing about the lacrosse camp, but her face confirmed it. God, you really used my mother's life insurance to pay for your precious children's activities. The front door opened, and Dad's voice echoed through the foyer. Patricia. Emma. I'm home. Patricia's eyes went wide with panic, and in that moment, I realized something that made my stomach drop. Dad didn't know. He had no idea what his wife had been doing with my inheritance. Emma, please, Patricia whispered urgently. Don't do this. Don't hurt your father like this. He's been through so much already, losing your mother, and then trying to blend our families. You mean don't tell him that his wife is a thief? Girls. Where is everyone? Dad's footsteps were getting closer to the kitchen. Patricia grabbed my wrist across the island, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my skin. If you say anything, anything at all, I will make your life hell. This family, this house, your relationship with your father, I can destroy all of it. The kitchen door swung open, and Dad appeared with his tired smile and loosened tie, completely oblivious to the war that had just been declared in his kitchen. There are my girls. Dad's voice boomed with forced cheerfulness, the kind he'd been using since marrying Patricia, like he was trying to convince himself we were actually a happy blended family. How was everyone's day? Patricia's grip on my wrist tightened for a split second before she released me, her smile snapping back into place with practiced ease. Wonderful, honey. Emma and I were just discussing her college plans. I stared at my father, really looked at him for the first time in months. When had those lines around his eyes gotten so deep? When had his hair gone from salt and pepper to mostly salt? He looked exhausted, older than his 52 years, and I realized Patricia had been slowly bleeding him dry too. That's great, Dad said, kissing Patricia's cheek before ruffling my hair like I was still 12. I keep telling you girls how important it is to communicate. Your mom would be so proud of how you two have bonded. The casual mention of my mother, my real mother, while standing in her destroyed kitchen with the woman who'd stolen her final gift to me was like a physical blow. Patricia's eyes glittered with satisfaction at my flinch. Actually, Dad, there is something I wanted to discuss with you about college. I kept my voice steady, watching Patricia's face pale. It's about my inheritance account. Oh, Emma, your father just got home, Patricia interjected smoothly, moving to Dad's side and placing a possessive hand on his arm. He's had such a long day at the office. Maybe we could talk about boring financial stuff after dinner. I'm making that salmon dish you love. But Dad was already frowning, his accountant brain shifting into gear. What about the account? Is everything okay with the balance? The balance is fine, Patricia said quickly. Emma's just eager to understand the investment strategies we've been using. You know how impatient young people can be about money. Investment strategies. I couldn't keep the bitter edge out of my voice. Is that what we're calling it? Dad looked between us, finally picking up on the tension crackling through the kitchen. What's going on here? Patricia, have the statements been coming to the house? I realized I haven't seen any paperwork on Emma's account in months. That's because there's nothing left to send statements about, I said, pulling the bank papers from my jacket. There's $247.83 left, Dad. Out of $150,000. The color drained from Dad's face as he took the papers with shaking hands. I watched him scan the transactions, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to something that looked like physical pain. Patricia. His voice was barely above a whisper. What is this? These withdrawals, 15,000, 8,000. He looked up at his wife, and I saw something break in his eyes. Please tell me there's an explanation for this. Patricia's composure finally cracked. David, let me explain. The market has been terrible, and we've had so many expenses with the kids and the house, and Emma's health insurance alone costs. Stop. Dad held up a hand, still staring at the papers. Just, stop talking for a minute. He sank onto one of the kitchen stools, suddenly looking every one of his years. This money, this was from Sarah's life insurance policy. The one she took out specifically for Emma's education. I know, baby, but... You spent my dead wife's money on a car. His voice was hollow, detached. And renovations. And, what's this $4,500 charge in August? Patricia opened and closed her mouth, trapped. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Melissa's sorority fees, I answered when she couldn't. And the $6,200 in November was Danny's lacrosse camp. Dad looked at Patricia like he was seeing a stranger. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Dad sat there holding those papers, his hands trembling slightly as he processed what his wife had done. Patricia looked between us with growing desperation, her perfect mask finally slipping completely. David, please, you have to understand, I was trying to protect this family. Emma was so young when we got married, and you were grieving, and someone had to make the hard decisions. Hard decisions. Dad's voice was deadly quiet. You used my daughter's inheritance to pay for your children's extracurricular activities. Our children, Patricia corrected desperately. This is a blended family, David. We agreed that meant sharing resources, making sacrifices for everyone's benefit. We agreed that you would help me raise Emma. Not steal from her. I watched this exchange with a mixture of vindication and heartbreak. Part of me was thrilled to see Patricia's web of lies finally unraveling. But seeing Dad's devastation, the way his shoulders sagged as he realized what his second wife had been doing behind his back, made my chest ache. The BMW, Dad said suddenly, looking up at Patricia. The one you said was a graduation gift from your parents. How much did that cost? Patricia's silence was answer enough. Jesus Christ. Dad ran his hands through his hair. The kitchen renovation. The new furniture. Your jewelry. His eyes landed on her tennis bracelet, and I watched him do the math. How long has this been going on, Patricia? How long have you been lying to my face? I wasn't lying. I was managing assets for this family's benefit. Whose family? The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. Because Melissa and Danny aren't my family. They're your kids who got a free ride on my dead mother's money while I've been taking out student loans and working 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore. Patricia whirled on me, her composure completely gone now. You ungrateful little brat. Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed for this family? Taking care of your father while he was barely functional with grief. Raising a sullen teenager who resented my every breath. I've given 3 years of my life to this household. And you've taken $150,000 of mine in return, I shot back. Seems like a pretty good deal for you. Enough. Dad's voice cut through our argument like a whip crack. Both of you, just enough. He stood up slowly, like an old man, still clutching the bank statements. Patricia, I need you to get me documentation of every penny. Investment records, receipts, whatever justification you think you have for spending Emma's inheritance. David, honey, if you'd just calm down and let me explain the financial strategy. There is no strategy. He slammed his hand on the granite countertop, making both Patricia and me jump. Look at these numbers. This isn't investment management, it's theft. Pure and simple theft from my child. Patricia's face went white, then red. Don't you dare call me a thief. After everything I've done for this family, for your daughter. What exactly have you done for me? I demanded. Name one thing you've done that actually benefited me and not yourself or your kids. She opened her mouth, then closed it, clearly scrambling for an answer that wouldn't damn her further. That's what I thought, I said. You know what the worst part is, Patricia? It's not just the money. It's that this was the last thing my mom left me. The last tangible proof that she loved me and wanted me to have a future. And you spent it on fucking sorority dues and lacrosse camps. Dad flinched at my language, but he didn't correct me. Instead, he looked at his wife with something approaching disgust. We're getting lawyers involved, he said quietly. First thing tomorrow morning. Patricia's face went ashen. David, please, let's handle this as a family. We stopped being a family the moment you stole from my daughter. The next morning, I woke up to raised voices from downstairs. Through my bedroom floor, I could hear Patricia's sharp tone and Dad's deeper rumble, though I couldn't make out words. I'd barely slept, lying awake replaying the kitchen confrontation and wondering if Dad would actually follow through on his threat about lawyers, or if Patricia would somehow manipulate her way out of this like she had everything else for the past 3 years. I crept to the top of the stairs, pressing my ear to the wall. Absolutely not negotiable, Patricia. We're meeting with Robert Chen at 10 o'clock, and you're going to explain every single transaction. Robert? Patricia's voice pitched higher. David, you can't involve my brother in this. He's a tax attorney, not a family counselor. Your brother is also the executor of Emma's trust documentation. Something I'm now realizing I should have checked on years ago. My heart hammered. There was trust documentation. I thought Patricia had just been added as a co-signer on Mom's simple savings account. The trust was designed to be flexible, Patricia said, but her voice sounded strained. The language specifically allows for educational and living expenses. Does it allow for luxury cars? Because I spent an hour last night going through our bank records, Patricia. That BMW wasn't $12,000 like you told me. It was $47,000. $47,000 of Emma's money. I heard something crash, maybe a coffee mug hitting the floor. You went through my personal accounts. Patricia's voice was shaking with rage now. How dare you? I am your wife, David, not some criminal you need to investigate. Aren't you, though? Dad's voice was ice cold. Because I also found the credit card statements. The ones you've been hiding in your desk. $15,000 at Nordstrom, $8,000 at that jewelry store on 5th Street, $6,000 at the spa resort where you took Melissa for her birthday weekend. Those expenses were legitimate. I needed professional clothes for the charity board, and Melissa deserved a proper celebration. With Emma's money. While Emma ate ramen noodles in her dorm room and took out loans to pay for textbooks. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making noise. Dad had done his homework. He'd spent the night unraveling Patricia's web of lies, and apparently it went even deeper than I'd realized. Where are Melissa and Danny? Dad asked suddenly, his tone shifting. They're staying at my sister's for a few days. Until this all gets sorted out. You sent them away. There was a long pause. You knew this was coming. You've been preparing for this conversation. I was protecting my children from unnecessary drama. Your children. Right. Dad's laugh was bitter. Never our children when it comes to protecting them, is it, Patricia? Only when it comes to spending Emma's inheritance on them. I heard footsteps moving across the kitchen, then the sound of papers rustling. What is this? Dad's voice had gone dangerously quiet again. What is what? This bank account. Patricia Chin Rodriguez. A separate account I've never seen before. More rustling. Monthly transfers of $3,000. Going back 2 years. His voice rose. Patricia, where the hell is this money coming from? The silence stretched so long I thought maybe they'd left the kitchen. Then Patricia spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. The settlement money came through last month. What settlement money? From the malpractice suit. Against Sarah's doctors. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Malpractice suit. My mother's doctors. What malpractice suit? Dad's voice was deadly calm. Patricia, what the hell are you talking about? The delayed diagnosis. The missed screenings that could have caught the cancer earlier. My attorney friend Rebecca looked into it after we got married, said there was definitely a case. You sued my dead wife's doctors. And didn't tell me. I was protecting you from more heartache. And it worked, David. We got $127,000. Money that can help this family. We. Dad's voice cracked like a whip. There is no we in a settlement for Sarah's medical care. That money belongs to Emma. My legs gave out, and I sank down onto the top step, my whole world tilting. Patricia had not only stolen my inheritance, she'd been collecting money from a lawsuit about my mother's death and hiding it from both Dad and me. The woman hadn't just been stealing. She'd been profiting from my mother's death while I grieved, all while playing the concerned stepmother. I stumbled down the stairs on shaking legs, no longer caring about eavesdropping. The kitchen door slammed open as I burst through, and both Dad and Patricia whirled around to stare at me. A malpractice lawsuit? My voice came out as a croak. You sued Mom's doctors and kept the money? Dad's face crumpled when he saw me. Emma, sweetheart, I had no idea. $127,000, I said, the number hanging in the air like poison. That's what my mother's suffering was worth to you, Patricia. That's what you made off her death. Patricia straightened, and I saw a flash of the cold calculation that had been hiding beneath her stepmother act for 3 years. That money was compensation for medical negligence that cost this family. This family. I stepped closer, fury making me bold. You weren't even part of this family when she died. You showed up 8 months later with your casseroles and your fake sympathy, and you've been cashing in on her death ever since. Emma, that's enough, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked shell-shocked, like he was seeing his wife clearly for the first time. No, it's not enough. I turned to Patricia, 3 years of suppressed rage finally finding its voice. Did you target him on purpose? Did you research widowers with life insurance payouts? Is that how you found Dad? Patricia's mask slipped completely. You have no idea what you're talking about, you spoiled little. Spoiled. The laugh that came out of me was harsh, ugly. I've been working part-time jobs since I was 19 to pay for groceries while you bought designer handbags with my dead mother's money. I've been eating generic cereal and walking to campus to save bus fare while you paid for Melissa's spring break trips to Cancun. Those expenses were investments in this family's future. Stop calling it a family. I slammed my hand on the counter, making the coffee cups jump. We were never a family. We were a business opportunity. You married a grieving widower and systematically stole everything my mother left behind. Dad sank into a chair, his face gray. The settlement money, Patricia. When did it come through? Last month, she admitted reluctantly. But David, you have to understand, the legal fees were enormous, and Rebecca said. Rebecca Montez. Dad looked up sharply. Your tennis partner Rebecca. She's not even a malpractice attorney, Patricia. She does real estate law. Patricia's silence confirmed what we were all thinking. She'd probably paid her friend a consultation fee to make the whole thing seem legitimate while pocketing the rest. Jesus. Dad rubbed his face with both hands. How deep does this go? What else don't I know about? I pulled out my phone, an idea crystallizing. I'm calling Uncle Robert myself. Right now. Emma, wait, Patricia lunged for my phone, but I dodged away. Uncle Robert. It's Emma. Patricia's stepdaughter. I kept my eyes on Patricia as I spoke. I need to ask you about the trust fund my mother set up. Yes, the one Patricia's been managing. Patricia shook her head frantically, mouthing, no, at me, but I pressed on. She's been what? I felt my knees go weak at whatever Uncle Robert was saying. Multiple trusts. What do you mean multiple trusts? Dad stood up slowly, his face darkening as he watched Patricia's expression crumble. Uncle Robert, I need you to come over here right now. Bring everything. All the paperwork Patricia signed. I hung up and stared at my stepmother. Multiple trusts, Patricia. How much money are we really talking about? Patricia backed toward the kitchen door, her perfect composure finally shattered completely. Emma, you don't understand the complexities of estate planning. Try me, I said. Because Uncle Robert just told me there's a second trust worth $89,000 that I've never even heard of. And apparently you've been receiving trustee fees for 3 years. Dad's chair scraped against the floor as he stood. When he spoke, his voice was barely controlled rage. Get out. David, please. Get out of my house. Now. David, you can't just throw me out. This is my home too. Patricia's voice cracked, desperation bleeding through her anger. We're married. I have legal rights here. Legal rights? Dad's laugh was hollow, bitter. Like the legal right you had to forge my signature on trust documents. My blood froze. What? Uncle Robert's voice had been muffled on the phone, but now I was starting to piece together fragments of what he tried to tell me. Multiple trusts. Trustee fees. And now Dad was talking about forged signatures. I never forged anything. Patricia backed further toward the door, but her eyes were darting around like a trapped animal. I had power of attorney for Emma's financial matters. Power of attorney that expired when she turned 21, Dad cut her off. Which was 8 months ago, Patricia. 8 months during which you've continued making withdrawals and collecting fees from an account you had no legal right to touch. The kitchen felt like it was spinning. I gripped the counter to steady myself. Patricia, tell me you didn't. It was an oversight. A clerical error. The bank never updated their records when Emma's birthday passed, and I didn't realize. Bullshit. Dad slammed his fist on the table, making me jump. In 36 years of knowing my father, I'd never seen him this angry. You knew exactly what you were doing. Just like you knew exactly what you were doing when you set up that secondary trust fund that Emma's never even heard of. What secondary trust fund? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Dad's expression softened when he looked at me, pain flickering across his features. Sweetheart, your mother, she didn't just have the life insurance policy. She had her retirement account too. Her 401k from the hospital. When she got sick, she rolled it over into an education trust specifically for you. That's impossible. She told me about the life insurance, but she never mentioned. Because she was protecting you from the stress while she was going through chemo, Dad said quietly. She made me promise not to tell you about the retirement money until you graduated college. She wanted you to focus on your studies, not worry about finances. I stared at Patricia, pieces clicking into place with nauseating clarity. You knew. When you married Dad, you knew about both accounts. Patricia's face had gone chalk white. The retirement fund needed active management. It was complicated, with tax implications and rollover requirements. How much? My voice was deadly calm. How much was in my mother's retirement account? Emma, that's not important right now. How much? Patricia flinched. 89,000. But the market fluctuations meant that you could hide the losses while you spent it. I felt something cold and calculating settle over me, pushing back the raw emotion. Uncle Robert said you've been collecting trustee fees. How much have you been paying yourself to steal my money? They weren't fees for theft. Managing complex financial instruments requires expertise. $2,000 a month, Dad said quietly, looking at papers he pulled from Patricia's desk drawer. For 36 months. Patricia, you've paid yourself $72,000 in management fees to drain both of Emma's accounts. The numbers hit me like physical blows. The original inheritance, $150,000. The retirement fund, $89,000. Trustee fees, $72,000. Patricia had stolen over $300,000 from me while playing the concerned stepmother. You know what the worst part is? I found myself speaking with an eerie calm that scared even me. It's not just the money. It's that you made me feel guilty for wanting it. You made me feel spoiled and ungrateful for asking about my own inheritance while you were systematically robbing me blind. I was protecting you from making foolish financial decisions. Like what? Like paying for college without loans? Like having the security my mother died to give me? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay controlled. Or were you protecting me from having enough money to move out and see through your manipulative bullshit? Don't you dare speak to me like that in my own home. Your home. Dad's voice cut through Patricia's protest like a blade. This was Sarah's home. The mortgage was paid off with Sarah's life insurance money, the policy I took out, not Emma's education fund. Every piece of furniture you replaced, every renovation you made, you were erasing my first wife from her own house. I was trying to help you heal. To move forward instead of living in a shrine. By stealing from our daughter. Dad's voice cracked on the word daughter, and I realized he'd never stop thinking of me that way, even after remarrying. By profiting off Sarah's death. The front door opened with a bang, and Uncle Robert's voice echoed through the foyer. Patricia. We need to talk. Now. I heard his footsteps approaching the kitchen, along with what sounded like a second set. Patricia's face went from white to gray. Robert, thank God you're here, Patricia started, her voice taking on that manipulative sweetness again. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Uncle Robert pushed through the kitchen door, a thick folder under his arm and a grim expression on his face. Behind him walked a woman I didn't recognize, sharp suit, briefcase, all business. Patricia Chin Rodriguez. The woman stepped forward. I'm Detective Sarah Morrison with the Financial Crimes Unit. We need to discuss some irregularities in several trust accounts under your management. The kitchen fell into dead silence. Patricia's face went from gray to green, and for a moment I thought she might actually faint. Detective Morrison's presence transformed what had felt like a messy family drama into something much more serious, something criminal. Detective? Dad's voice was hoarse. I don't understand. We were planning to handle this privately, through family attorneys. Mr. Rodriguez, financial institutions are required to report suspicious account activity to our department, Detective Morrison explained, setting her briefcase on Mom's old kitchen table. Wells Fargo flagged multiple irregular transactions on these trust accounts 3 weeks ago. Large withdrawals, trustee fee payments to non-licensed financial advisors, and transactions occurring after the beneficiary reached legal age. Uncle Robert opened his folder, spreading documents across the granite countertop Patricia had bought with my money. Emma, I need you to understand something. When your mother set up these trusts, she was very specific about the terms. No withdrawals except for direct educational expenses, tuition, books, housing. And absolutely no trustee fees unless the manager held proper financial licensing. I was managing those funds responsibly, Patricia said, but her voice had lost all its earlier conviction. Every withdrawal was for Emma's benefit. Ma'am, I'm going to stop you right there, Detective Morrison interrupted, pulling out a digital recorder. Before we continue, I need to inform you that anything you say can be used in court proceedings. You have the right to an attorney present during questioning. The word court hit the kitchen like a bomb. Dad sank back into his chair, the weight of the situation clearly settling over him. This wasn't just about stolen money anymore, his wife was about to be arrested in our kitchen. Court proceedings. Patricia's voice pitched higher. Detective, I think there's been a serious mistake. I'm Emma's stepmother. I was appointed as co-trustee by her father. Actually, Mrs. Rodriguez, that's part of the problem. Uncle Robert pulled out a thick legal document. This is the original trust paperwork your mother signed, Emma. Your father was never authorized to appoint co-trustees. Only the primary trustee, me, had that authority. I stared at the papers, my mother's signature clearly visible at the bottom. Then how did Patricia get access to the accounts? Uncle Robert's expression darkened. She forged my signature on an amendment document and presented it to the bank along with a fake power of attorney. The bank has confirmed that the notary stamp was falsified. That's impossible, Patricia said, but she was backing toward the kitchen door again. Robert, you signed those papers at your office in March 2021. You were there when? Patricia, I was in Denver in March 2021. My father-in-law's funeral. I have airline receipts, hotel confirmations, and about 50 witnesses. Uncle Robert's voice was ice cold. Which means you not only forged my signature, you also committed notary fraud. Detective Morrison was taking notes now, her pen scratching across a small pad. Mrs. Rodriguez, bank records show you've withdrawn $239,000 from these combined accounts over 36 months. Can you provide documentation showing how these funds were used for the beneficiary's educational expenses? Patricia opened her mouth, then closed it. We all knew she couldn't provide that documentation because it didn't exist. The money had gone to BMWs and kitchen renovations and her children's extracurricular activities. I want a lawyer, Patricia finally whispered. That's your right, Detective Morrison said. But I need to inform you that we'll be placing holds on all accounts associated with your name pending investigation. That includes the secondary account where the malpractice settlement was deposited. Dad's head snapped up. You're freezing our joint accounts. Sir, any account with Mrs. Rodriguez's name will be temporarily frozen until we can determine which funds are legitimate marital assets versus stolen trust money. Detective Morrison's tone was professional but not unsympathetic. We'll work to release legitimate funds as quickly as possible. The full scope of what was happening finally hit me. Patricia wasn't just going to face consequences, she was going to be arrested. Charged with felony theft, fraud, forgery. Her perfect suburban life was about to implode completely. And somehow, watching her facade crumble in our kitchen, I felt something I hadn't expected, a cold, calculating satisfaction. Justice for my mother. Justice for 3 years of manipulation and lies. This was just the beginning. Detective Morrison was still explaining the legal process when Patricia's phone started buzzing frantically on the counter. She lunged for it, but Uncle Robert was faster, snatching it away before she could reach it. Melissa, he read from the screen. Mom, Danny saw the news. Are you okay? Should we come home? Uncle Robert looked up sharply. What news, Patricia? Patricia's face went ashen. I don't know what she's talking about. Detective Morrison was already pulling out her own phone. After a few swipes, her expression darkened. Mrs. Rodriguez, did you give an interview to Channel 7 News 3 days ago about financial fraud awareness? What? Dad and I said simultaneously. The detective turned her phone toward us, and I felt my stomach drop. There was Patricia on the small screen, sitting in what looked like a professional studio, wearing her navy blue, trustworthy stepmother outfit. I've seen too many families torn apart by financial irresponsibility, Patricia's voice came through the phone speaker. Young adults who inherit money often make devastating decisions, gambling, drugs, impulse purchases. As a step-parent, I felt obligated to protect my stepdaughter's future by ensuring her inheritance was properly managed until she demonstrated real maturity. The news anchor nodded sympathetically. And you've been managing her accounts for how long? 3 years now. It's been challenging, but someone has to make the hard choices. I've invested conservatively, paid her educational expenses, and maintained careful records of every transaction. When she's 25 and ready for real financial responsibility, she'll thank me for preserving her mother's legacy. Detective Morrison paused the video. The silence in our kitchen was deafening. You went on the fucking news. I whispered, staring at Patricia in disbelief. You went on television and lied about stealing my money. I was trying to help other families avoid. You were covering your tracks, Dad interrupted, his voice hollow. Jesus Christ, Patricia. You knew this investigation was coming, didn't you? You've been preparing a public defense. Detective Morrison scrolled through her phone. The segment aired Tuesday night. Local stepmother advocates for responsible inheritance management. It's been shared over 3,000 times on social media. She looked up at Patricia. Ma'am, did your attorney advise you to give this interview? I don't have to answer that without my lawyer present. Actually, you kind of do, Uncle Robert said grimly, pulling out another document. Patricia, this is a cease and desist order I filed yesterday morning. You're legally prohibited from making any public statements about Emma's trust funds or your role in managing them. My head was spinning. Uncle Robert, how did you know about the news interview before I even called you this morning? Because 3 different people sent me the video Tuesday night. Including my law partner, who specializes in elder abuse and financial fraud cases. Uncle Robert's expression was grim. Emma, I've been investigating Patricia's activities for 2 weeks now. The bank contacted me directly when they flagged the suspicious transactions. 2 weeks. Dad stood up slowly, processing this information. Robert, why didn't you call me immediately? Because Patricia forged my signature, David. I needed to gather evidence before making accusations I couldn't prove. Uncle Robert spread more papers across the counter. I've been working with Wells Fargo's fraud department to trace every transaction. Did you know she opened a credit line using the trust accounts as collateral? She did what? My voice came out as a squeak. Detective Morrison looked up from her notes. Mrs. Rodriguez secured a $75,000 line of credit in January, using the trust funds as backing. The credit line has been maxed out, $73,400 in charges over the past 8 months. What did you spend $73,000 on? Dad's voice was barely controlled fury. Patricia pressed herself against the kitchen door, trapped. David, I can explain everything. The credit line was for home improvements that benefit Emma too. Home improvements. Uncle Robert pulled out a thick stack of credit card statements. Let's see, $23,000 at Exclusive Getaways Travel Agency. That was for Melissa's graduation trip to Europe, wasn't it? $8,900 at Tiffany & Co. in March, around the time of your anniversary. $12,000 at Preston Academy, Danny's private school tuition. Each line item felt like a physical blow. My mother's money had been funding Patricia's entire lifestyle while I ate dollar store pasta and walked miles to campus to save on bus fare. The most interesting charge, Uncle Robert continued, is $15,600 to Morrison & Associates Legal Services. Patricia, did you use Emma's trust fund to pay for the attorney who helped you set up the fraudulent documents? Detective Morrison's pen stopped moving. Mrs. Rodriguez, did you use the victim's own money to finance the fraud against her? Patricia's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call, not a text, and the name, Rebecca Montez, flashed on the screen. Uncle Robert answered it himself. Rebecca? This is Robert Chen. Patricia can't come to the phone right now. Yes, I'm sure you've seen the detective's car in the driveway. No, I don't think Patricia will be able to make your lunch appointment today. He hung up and looked at Detective Morrison. Rebecca Montez. The attorney friend who supposedly handled the malpractice lawsuit. She just wanted to warn Patricia that someone from your department contacted her office this morning. The web of lies was unraveling faster than I could process. Patricia hadn't just stolen my money, she'd built an entire criminal enterprise around it, complete with fake legal documents, fraudulent news interviews, and accomplices. And through it all, she'd made me feel like an ungrateful child for wanting access to my own inheritance. Detective Morrison closed her notepad and looked directly at me. Miss Rodriguez, I need to ask, have there been any other financial accounts or assets that Mrs. Rodriguez had access to? Insurance policies, investment accounts, anything else your mother might have left? I was about to shake my head when a memory hit me like a freight train. The college fund. What college fund? Dad asked. Mom's friend Janet from the hospital. She mentioned it at the funeral, said Mom had been putting money into some kind of education savings account since I was little. I looked at Patricia, whose face had somehow managed to get even paler. Patricia, you said that account was closed years ago. You said there was never any money in it. Patricia's mouth opened and closed silently. Uncle Robert was already pulling out his phone. 529 Education Savings Plan. I helped Sarah set it up when Emma was 12. He looked up at Patricia with disgust. Please tell me you didn't touch that account too. The account had matured, and the funds needed to be rolled over into a more aggressive growth portfolio. How much? Dad's voice was barely a whisper. Detective Morrison was taking notes again. Mrs. Rodriguez, we're going to need specific dollar amounts and account numbers for all education savings plans. 43,000, Patricia whispered. But I reinvested it. Every penny went toward Emma's future. Where? I demanded. Where did you reinvest it? Because I sure as hell haven't seen any investment statements. Uncle Robert was scrolling through his phone with growing alarm. Patricia, the 529 account shows a complete liquidation in September 2022. $43,847 transferred to your personal checking account. There's no record of any reinvestment. September 2022. I remembered that month clearly. It was when Patricia had surprised Melissa with a early graduation gift of a brand new MacBook Pro and iPad for her senior year. It was also when she'd announced that the family was taking a bonding vacation to Cabo for Thanksgiving. The Cabo trip, I said, the pieces clicking together. That's what you spent it on, isn't it? The resort, the flights, the excursions. You spent my college fund on a family vacation that I wasn't even invited to. You were invited. Patricia protested desperately. You chose to stay here for work. I chose to stay here because I was working double shifts at the bookstore to afford groceries. My voice cracked with rage. While you were drinking my ties on the beach with money my mother saved for my education. Dad stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I paid for that vacation. Patricia, you told me you'd gotten a bonus from the charity board. You said, he stopped, his face crumpling. Jesus Christ, how many lies? How many fucking lies have you told me? Detective Morrison looked up from her notes. Mr. Rodriguez, we're going to need you to come to the station to give a formal statement. It appears you may be a victim of fraud as well. How is Dad a victim? I asked. Because Mrs. Rodriguez used forged documents to access accounts that weren't hers, then used those stolen funds to pay for family expenses that your father believed he was covering with legitimate income, the detective explained. She essentially tricked your father into accepting stolen money to subsidize their lifestyle. The front door slammed open, and Patricia's daughter Melissa burst into the kitchen, followed by a sullen-looking teenage boy I assumed was Danny. Melissa's eyes were red from crying, and she was clutching her phone. Mom, what the hell is going on? There are people on Twitter saying you're being arrested. Melissa stopped short when she saw Detective Morrison's badge. Oh my God, is it true? Patricia reached for her daughter. Melissa, sweetheart, there's been a misunderstanding. Ma'am, I need you to step back, Detective Morrison said firmly. Miss, I'm going to need you and a young man to wait in another room while we finish here. No. Melissa whirled on me, her face twisted with anger. This is your fault, isn't it? You're trying to destroy our family because you're jealous that your dad moved on from your dead mom. The words hit me like a slap. Dad stepped forward, his face dark with fury, but I held up a hand to stop him. Jealous? I laughed, and it came out sharp and bitter. Melissa, your mother stole over $300,000 from me. Money my dying mother saved for my future. Money she spent on your sorority fees and your trip to Europe and your designer clothes while I've been living on ramen and student loans. Melissa's face crumpled. That's not true. Mom would never. But even as she said it, I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. She was 19, not stupid. She'd seen the expensive gifts, the sudden lifestyle upgrade when Patricia married Dad. Deep down, she'd probably always wondered where the money was coming from. Danny, who'd been silent in a corner, suddenly spoke up. Mom, what about my lacrosse equipment? The $1,000 stick you bought me last month? His voice was small, confused. You said Dad gave you money for it. Patricia's face crumpled as she realized her own children were starting to piece together the truth. Danny, sweetheart, financial matters are complicated. It's a yes or no question, I said, looking directly at the boy. Danny, your mom spent $6,000 of my dead mother's money on your lacrosse camp. She spent another $4,000 on your private school tuition. Every expensive thing you've gotten in the past 3 years was paid for with money stolen from me. That's enough. Patricia screamed, finally snapping completely. You vindictive little bitch. I gave you a home. I gave you a family. I raised you when your precious daddy was too drunk with grief to function. The kitchen erupted. Dad lunged toward Patricia, Uncle Robert grabbed his arm to hold him back, and Detective Morrison stepped between them with her hand on her radio. Mrs. Rodriguez, you need to calm down immediately, the detective said sharply. You're making this situation much worse for yourself. But Patricia was beyond reason now, 3 years of careful manipulation finally exploding into pure rage. You want to know the truth, Emma? Fine. Your saint of a mother wasn't the perfect woman everyone pretends she was. She was selfish and controlling, hoarding money while your father worked himself to death trying to pay her medical bills. Patricia, stop, Dad warned, his voice dangerous. No. I'm done protecting everyone's feelings. Patricia whirled on me, her face twisted with hatred. Your mother knew she was dying for months before she told anyone. Months. She could have used that life insurance money for experimental treatments, could have fought harder, but instead she was more worried about leaving you a college fund than actually trying to survive for you. The words hit me like physical blows. I felt Uncle Robert's hand on my shoulder, steadying me as my knees threatened to give out. That's not true, I whispered. Isn't it? Patricia's smile was cruel now, all pretense gone. Ask your father. Ask him about the oncologist in Houston who said there were options if we could afford them. Ask him about the clinical trial in California that your mother refused because she didn't want to waste the money that should go to your future. I looked at Dad, and the devastation in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. There was truth in Patricia's words, even if she was weaponizing it in the cruelest possible way. Your mother chose to die rather than spend your inheritance, Patricia continued, oblivious to the destruction she was causing. So don't you dare act like I'm the villain for making sure that money actually got used to take care of this family instead of sitting in some account gathering dust as a monument to her martyrdom. Detective Morrison grabbed Patricia's arm. Ma'am, you're under arrest for felony theft, fraud, and forgery. The handcuffs clicked into place as Patricia finally seemed to realize she'd gone too far. Wait, she said, panic replacing rage. Wait, I want my lawyer. I want. But it was too late. The Miranda rights echoed through Mom's kitchen as Patricia was led away, leaving behind 3 devastated kids and the smoking ruins of what we thought was our family. As the front door closed behind them, I realized Patricia had gotten one last revenge. She'd made sure that even when justice was served, the victory would taste like ashes. The next few hours blurred together in a haze of police interviews, legal paperwork, and phone calls. Uncle Robert had taken charge, his attorney instincts kicking in as he coordinated with Detective Morrison and started the process of freezing Patricia's assets. Dad sat at the kitchen table looking shell-shocked, occasionally answering questions in a monotone voice that scared me more than his earlier rage had. Melissa and Danny had retreated upstairs to pack bags. Child services required them to stay with relatives while their mother was being processed, and Patricia's sister Maria was driving down from Sacramento to collect them. The house felt strange with their muffled crying echoing from the second floor, a constant reminder that Patricia's crimes had victims beyond just me. Emma. Uncle Robert touched my shoulder gently. Detective Morrison needs to go over the timeline with you one more time. Can you handle that right now, or do you need a break? I looked up from the bank statements I'd been staring at without really seeing. I'm okay. Let's get it over with. Detective Morrison settled across from me with her notepad, her expression professional but kind. I know this has been overwhelming, but your testimony is crucial for building a solid case. Can you walk me through when you first became suspicious about the account discrepancies? It wasn't suspicion exactly, I said slowly, trying to organize my thoughts. It was more like, things never added up, but Patricia always had explanations that made me feel stupid for asking. I paused, remembering. Like last Christmas, when I asked if there was enough in my inheritance to help with spring semester tuition. She got this look on her face, annoyed, maybe, and said the account was performing beautifully, but I needed to trust the process instead of constantly worrying about money. And you believed her. I wanted to believe her, I admitted. Dad seemed to trust her completely, and I thought maybe I was just being paranoid because I didn't like having a stepmother. The words tasted bitter. She was really good at making me feel like the problem was my attitude, not her management. Detective Morrison made notes. What changed? What made you decide to check the account balance yourself? I glanced at Dad, who was listening with a pained expression. My roommate Jessica got her trust fund statement last week. Her grandmother had left her about the same amount Mom left me, and even after paying 2 years of college expenses, she still had over $90,000. I felt my throat tighten. When Jessica started talking about using some of it for a study abroad program, I realized I hadn't seen my own statement in almost 2 years. Patricia always said they came to the house and she filed them with all the other important financial documents, but I'd never actually seen one. So you went to the bank? I went to the bank, I confirmed. And Marcus, the teller, he looked at me with such pity when he told me the balance. Like he knew something terrible had happened but couldn't say it directly. Uncle Robert leaned forward. Emma, I need to ask you something that might be difficult. Did Patricia ever pressure you to sign any documents? Even something that seemed routine, like updating your address or beneficiary information? I frowned, trying to remember. Actually, yeah. Last year, around my birthday, she brought me this stack of papers and said the bank needed updated signatures for security purposes. Something about new federal regulations for trust accounts. Detective Morrison's pen stopped moving. Do you remember what those papers looked like? Were they bank forms, or something else? They looked official, I said, anxiety creeping into my voice. Patricia had sticky notes marking where I needed to sign, and she was standing right there watching, talking about how tedious banking paperwork was. A horrible thought occurred to me. Oh God, did I sign something that gave her more access to my accounts? Uncle Robert and Detective Morrison exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. We'll need to subpoena those documents, Detective Morrison said grimly. But Emma, if Patricia had you unknowingly sign additional authorization forms, it could complicate the fraud charges. Defense attorneys sometimes argue that victims consented to account access, even when they were deceived about what they were signing. Are you saying she might get away with this? My voice pitched higher with panic. Absolutely not, Uncle Robert said firmly. But it means we need to be prepared for a more complex legal battle than we initially thought. The front door opened, and a woman's voice called out hesitantly. Patricia. Kids. It's Aunt Maria. Dad stood wearily. I'll go explain the situation, he said, heading toward the foyer. I could hear his low voice mixing with Maria's shocked exclamations as the reality of Patricia's arrest sank in. Detective Morrison closed her notepad. Emma, I want you to understand something. What Patricia did, the systematic theft, the forged documents, the manipulation, this is going to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Even if the defense tries to muddy the waters with technicalities, we have overwhelming evidence of criminal intent. How long until we know if I can get any of the money back? I asked. That depends on what assets we can recover and liquidate, Uncle Robert explained. The BMW, the jewelry, the home improvements, will petition the court to force sales and restitution. But realistically, Emma, you should prepare for the possibility that some of your mother's money is simply gone forever. The weight of those words settled over me like a blanket of grief. Not just grief for the money, but for what it represented, the last tangible proof of my mother's love, the security she died to provide me, scattered across 3 years of Patricia's selfish choices. But underneath the grief, something else was building. Something cold and determined. Patricia thought she'd won by destroying our family along with my inheritance. She thought her final cruel words about Mom would break me. She was wrong. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in Uncle Robert's law office when he dropped the bombshell that changed everything. Emma, we found another account. I looked up from the victim impact statement I'd been writing for Patricia's sentencing hearing. What do you mean, another account? Uncle Robert slid a manila folder across his mahogany desk, his expression grim. Patricia's financial records from the court discovery process. There's a custodial investment account at Merrill Lynch that she opened in your name when you were 17. She's been your legal custodian on it for 5 years. My hands shook as I opened the folder. The account statements showed an opening balance of $87,000 in March 2019, money transferred from something called Rodriguez Family Trust, and a current balance of $234,891. I don't understand. Where did this money come from? And why would Patricia open an investment account for me when she was stealing from my other accounts? Uncle Robert leaned back in his leather chair, and I could see him choosing his words carefully. Emma, your father has been making monthly contributions to this account since your mother died. $2,000 every month for the past 5 years. He thought he was supplementing your inheritance to help with future expenses. The papers slipped from my numb fingers. Dad's been giving me $2,000 a month. For 5 years. He's been giving Patricia $2,000 a month, with explicit instructions that it go toward your future. She told him she was adding it to your existing trust fund for better investment diversification. Uncle Robert's voice hardened. Instead, she opened a separate account and has been collecting management fees on that one too. I did quick math in my head. $2,000 times 12 months times 5 years. That's $120,000 of Dad's money. Plus investment growth. Emma, your father has been working 60-hour weeks and living like a monk, thinking he was building your future. He's been driving a 15-year-old Honda and buying generic groceries while Patricia convinced him that his sacrifices were going toward your security. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. It was one thing to steal my mother's money, that was devastating but abstract. But the thought of my father skipping meals and working overtime to give Patricia money she was supposed to invest for me while she drove her BMW and redecorated the house. That was personal in a way that made my blood boil. There's more, Uncle Robert continued, pulling out another document. Patricia's been reporting this account to the IRS as a legitimate custodial investment, which means she's been claiming tax deductions for charitable contributions to Emma's education fund, while also collecting management fees. She's been getting tax breaks for stealing from Dad. Tax fraud on top of everything else. The IRS doesn't take kindly to people who claim charitable deductions for money they're embezzling. Uncle Robert's smile was sharp. Emma, Patricia's charges just got upgraded to federal crimes. She's looking at 10 to 15 years instead of 3 to 5. I stared at the investment statements, watching the numbers blur as tears of rage filled my eyes. But these weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of pure, crystalline fury. Uncle Robert, I said quietly, I want to change my victim impact statement. What do you mean? I looked up at him, and I could see my own cold determination reflected in his eyes. Patricia destroyed my family and stole my mother's legacy. But she also spent 5 years manipulating my father into funding her crimes while he thought he was taking care of me. She made him complicit in his own financial abuse. Emma, what are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time Patricia learned that she picked the wrong family to destroy. I gathered the papers with steady hands. And I'm thinking she has no idea what's coming for her. The courtroom was packed on the day of Patricia's sentencing hearing. I sat in the front row between Dad and Uncle Robert, wearing the black dress Mom had bought me for high school graduation, the last gift she'd given me before the cancer took her ability to shop. Behind us, I could hear the whispered conversations of extended family, friends, and what looked like several reporters who'd picked up the story after Patricia's federal charges made the news. Patricia sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her perfectly styled hair now pulled back in a simple ponytail, her designer nails chipped and unpolished. The transformation was jarring. 3 months in county jail had stripped away all the artificial polish that had masked her true nature for so long. When Judge Martinez called for victim impact statements, I stood on shaking legs and walked to the podium. Patricia's eyes followed me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her gaze, genuine fear. Your Honor, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. Patricia Rodriguez didn't just steal money from me. She stole my mother's final act of love and turned it into a weapon against my family. I pulled out the papers I'd prepared, but I didn't need to read from them. These words had been burning inside me for months. When my mother was dying of cervical cancer, she used her last lucid weeks to ensure I'd have a future. She converted her retirement account, maintained her life insurance payments even when the premiums stretched our budget, and created detailed trust documents to protect the money she'd saved $20 at a time. My voice caught, but I pushed forward. Patricia turned that sacrifice into an opportunity for fraud. Patricia's attorney shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We'd already proven that Patricia had spent $347,000 of my inheritance on personal expenses, forged legal documents, and committed tax fraud by claiming charitable deductions from money she was embezzling. The evidence was overwhelming: bank records, forged signatures, fraudulent notary stamps, even that disastrous news interview where she'd essentially confessed on camera. But the financial theft was only part of Patricia's crime, I continued, looking directly at her. She spent 5 years manipulating my father into giving her additional money, $120,000 of his own savings, by convincing him he was supplementing my inheritance. My father worked 60-hour weeks, drove a 15-year-old car, and lived on generic groceries, thinking his sacrifices were building my future. Instead, Patricia was collecting management fees on his contributions while spending my original inheritance on luxury cars and European vacations for her children. Dad's hand found mine, squeezing gently. When I'd first learned about his monthly contributions, I'd been furious that he hadn't told me. But I understood now, he'd been trying to honor Mom's memory by ensuring I had the security she'd wanted for me. Patricia had perverted that love into another avenue for theft. Patricia made me feel guilty for even asking about my inheritance, I said, my voice growing stronger. She called me immature and irresponsible while she spent my mother's life insurance money on designer jewelry. She lectured me about financial responsibility while paying for her daughter's sorority fees with my college fund. She convinced my father that I wasn't ready for adult financial decisions while she forged documents and committed federal crimes. I paused, looking around the courtroom. In the back, I spotted Melissa dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. She discovered that her entire college experience, USC tuition, sorority fees, study abroad program, had been funded with stolen money. Danny was in juvenile counseling, struggling with the guilt of benefiting from his mother's crimes. Your Honor, Patricia Rodriguez is a predator who targeted grieving families and exploited tragedy for personal gain. She deserves every day of the 15-year sentence the prosecution has recommended. As I walked back to my seat, Patricia's mask finally slipped completely. She was crying, not the calculated tears she'd used to manipulate Dad for years, but the raw, desperate sobs of someone who'd finally realized the magnitude of what she'd lost. Justice, it turned out, had a very specific sound. Judge Martinez adjusted his glasses and looked directly at Patricia before delivering his sentence. Mrs. Rodriguez, in 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such calculated and systematic theft from a victim who trusted you as family. You have been found guilty of wire fraud, tax evasion, forgery, and theft of $347,000 from your stepdaughter's inheritance accounts. Patricia's knees buckled as she gripped the defendant's table. The court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years supervised probation. You are ordered to pay full restitution of $347,000 plus interest, and all of your assets will be liquidated to satisfy this debt. The gavel's bang echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. 6 months later, I was sitting in the student financial aid office at my university, signing paperwork to withdraw my student loans. The asset recovery had been more successful than anyone expected. Patricia's BMW sold for $38,000, the jewelry liquidated for $47,000, and most surprisingly, the house sale had yielded enough to cover the home improvement costs she'd charged to my accounts. Combined with the Merrill Lynch account Dad had been funding and the malpractice settlement money that Patricia had hidden, I recovered $312,000 of the original theft. Not everything, but enough to finish college debt-free and have the security Mom had wanted for me. Miss Rodriguez, the financial aid counselor said, stamping the final form, you're officially withdrawn from all loan programs. Congratulations, that's not something we see very often. Walking across campus afterward, I called Dad from the quad. It's done. I'm officially not broke anymore. His laugh sounded lighter than it had in years. Your mother would be so proud, Emma. Not just of getting the money back, but of how you handled everything. The strength you showed in that courtroom. Dad was doing better too. The therapy he'd started after Patricia's arrest was helping him process not just the betrayal, but the guilt he carried about remarrying so soon after Mom's death. He'd sold the house, too many bad memories, and bought a small condo closer to his office. Without Patricia's expensive lifestyle to maintain, he was actually saving money for the first time in years. Dad? I've been thinking about something. What's that, sweetheart? I looked across the campus quad, watching students hurry between classes, most of them probably worried about tuition payments and student debt like I had been just that morning. I want to use some of the recovered money to set up a scholarship fund. For students who've lost parents. Maybe call it the Sarah Rodriguez Memorial Scholarship. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard Dad's voice, thick with emotion. Emma, your mother would have loved that more than anything. That evening, Uncle Robert called with one final update. Emma, I thought you'd want to know, Patricia's appeal was denied. She'll serve the full 12 years, no early parole. Good, I said, and I meant it. What about Melissa and Danny? They're doing better. Maria got them into family therapy, and Melissa's working part-time to help pay for community college. Danny's excelling in his new school district. They're good kids, Emma. They were victims too. After hanging up, I walked to my dresser and pulled out the small framed photo of Mom I kept there, the last picture we'd taken together before she got too sick. She was smiling despite the chemo headscarf, her arm around my shoulders, her eyes bright with determination. We got her, Mom, I whispered to the photo. We got her, and she's never going to hurt another family. The inheritance was back where it belonged. Patricia was in federal prison. And my mother's final gift, her love, her sacrifice, her belief in my future, was finally safe. Justice had been served, and it tasted exactly like victory.